Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome back to another edition of Locked On Seminoles. What's up, everybody? It's your boy Drake here, and in just a few short moments, I'll be joined by not only Max, but our very, very special guest, the one and only Mr. Big Game James Coleman. James Coleman was a fullback in the early 2000s for Florida State, and he left his mark there on the field, but also is currently leaving his mark off the field. He is the current founder of the Mike and Ope 1851 NL Collective to help Florida State athletes maximize their brand potential, also provide them avenues further down the line to basically set themselves up for not only the 4 years at the school, but 40 years after graduation. And also, he's the founder and the head of the Mentorship for the Kids Foundation, MFTK, where he helps young children with basic necessities such as backpacks and also lunches too as well, and food drives. And that's quite something that every single Seminole should strive for, to be somewhat that kind of character, not only once you're at the school, while you're at the school, but also once you leave the campus and are an alumni. And a lot of us can take a page from Mr. Coleman's book. And today, he discusses his time at Florida State, his journey to there, some fun little recruiting stories, some fun little football, former teammate stories, and also some great stories regarding Mr. Bobby Bowden with our first Seminoles Sit Down with a former Florida State legend. Thank you all so much for the love and support and making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every single day. Unfortunately, it took us a little bit of time to fix the audio and video with this podcast, with this interview. Primarily, for those of you who remember, we dropped parts 1 and parts 2 of this podcast interview about a few weeks ago. We finally got everything fixed up today. Unfortunately, the video wasn't able to survive that, but we respond by that by giving you this entire interview, near 2-hour interview, ad-free on YouTube as of right now. But I won't hold you back any further. Without further ado, let's go over to Max, myself, and Big Game James Coleman for the interview with our Seminole Sit Down with former FSU greats. And as always, take care, everybody, and feed the damn fullback.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I was going through my books today, and I found Coach Bowden's book, about faith and coaching. Did y'all have, you don't have to tell us the stories, but were there a lot of those sessions after he passed away, like calling teammates and just kind of sharing your Coach Bowden stories and like going through all those memories?
When he died, it was a surreal moment. Like so the funny is, it's not funny now, but it is funny actually. I almost died the week before he died. So I had COVID, and I had COVID bad. And what sucked was I do my annual book bag drive in the hood in Tallahassee, and that's when one of these people I was giving stuff to. Like, that's how people die. Like civil rights. I'm not comparing myself to MLK or Malcolm X or those guys, but they didn't die like from old age. They died because somebody that they were helping killed them. So my luck, I almost died giving book bags away and food to people, but I caught COVID. I get out. I've been out of the hospital for less than a week. I think like 3 or 4 days in this. And, I was getting the text messages, "Hey, prepare yourself.
Yeah,
it's bad. It's getting rough." And he, so like you do that, and then you start talking. Then when it happened, I say it now. It hurt now, but there's no real good way to just say an icon died or somebody that's close to you died. Get full transparency. Like right now, I know this will show later in the week, but my great uncle, my grandmother's last living brother just passed, and we found out on freaking Facebook. Like, that's not how I wanted to find out Uncle Harry died. And so we found out through, Jim Henry broke it, but the family trusted Jim to tell the story. So Jim's really, really good. I was mad at Jim, but but it had to be Jim when I mature. Step back and maturity kicks in, but it's like a kid losing his father, and you found out that you lost your dad on Twitter at 7 a.m. Like, you roll over and you're kind of like wiping the stuff out your eyes, and we've all been accustomed to the first thing you do in a social media age is you check Facebook, check your Twitter, check your TikTok or whatever, and boom, like right there, Bowden died. So I didn't want my teammates or people that I love that are part of the program to find out the same way I found out. So I'm picking up the phone. I'm calling Peter Warwick. I'm calling Snoop. I'm calling everybody, and then we're all sharing, what he meant to us. And yeah, I mean, it was but we talked. It was a lot of great stories, and his funeral was amazing too. Just to see all that Seminole history, and all these people talking about this man. And one thing about men, and I'll say this to fans, and this is I don't think anybody has ever had this take, but a lot of people only know one side of Bobby. And that's great that he was so great. But like, obviously I like to tell people that all shucks thing, that ain't really Bobby. You don't get to the position that he got to by being a pushover and not having teeth. So I always tell people there is some truth to what PK was saying. I don't necessarily know what happened. Nobody was in there, but there's a little bit in there. And I believe Bobby was trying to do what was best, but like, I've seen Coach Bowden show his teeth, and it's one of those things where it's like, yo, the old man Bowden, man. The old man is. And the thing about it, Mickey Andrews is like one of the toughest SOBs you'll ever meet in your life. Mickey Andrews ain't submitting to no pushover.
Right.
Like Mickey gotta know, like they got Chuck Amato the chest. Like these guys, like Bobby had to know that Bobby was a badass. I just think people need to realize that he's all of that. Me too. Like everything you ever heard about me, all that true.
Well, it's like
good, the good and the bad, and it just depends on if a person tells you I don't like big game and he did whoop whoop whoop. If you come to me and say, hey man, have you heard of such a hey man, Max was saying like, dog, you was mean and y'all got something. I said, well, was Max my competitor?
Yeah, right.
If Max was my competitor, I'm a terrible enemy. I'm a phenomenal friend. Oh, but you don't want to be on. If you're on the other side of me, I am trying to kill you in the most unceremonious way ever. It's how I'm wired. But,
and a lot of people found that out the hard way on the. People forget, and I mean this. Let me finish the statement I'm going to make because I mean this in the best way possible. Like, people forget reading your bio and like they know now James Coleman, this great fullback, this like iconic figure from the 2000s. Like you weren't the 5-star coming out of high school. Like you weren't the guy. Like you worked for it, right? You had to do it the hard way. I mean, I think in a lot of ways I'd probably compare like your rise almost to a Trayshawn Ward, right? Like you came from a small school, Florida High. You came up, you walked on, you decided to do it. You ended up becoming who you were. So I actually have one funny question. Now I want to get to the serious question. A few people I've talked to that knew Bobby said that you knew you'd made it when he knew your name and stopped just calling you Buddy. He called everyone Buddy. So when was that moment? When did you become James or when did you become Coleman? Like, was there a moment or?
I was never Coleman. I was never Coleman, but I knew he knew exactly who I was this month. So Thursday practice, Bobby would leave early because he had to go do the call-in show.
Yep.
So what I've learned is the people who are the most successful in life, and especially from their generations, are creatures of habits. They do literally the same exact thing over and over again, the same way. There's really no change in them. So Bobby literally I'm gonna tell you a lot of things, and I'm gonna tie it in.
Take your time,
so
man.
every Friday, was our travel day, and whether we were in Thomasville or we were on the road, he would literally pull out this little sheet of paper. It wasn't like big; it was like a little small sheet, like a little notebooks, that he wrote his thoughts down.
Like when there's like,
but when I tell you,
reporter flip pad kind of
thing.
Yeah,
like the reporter flip pads, exactly. But when I tell you, it was legitimately the same exact speech that I heard 4 years. And he would come up and like, wide receivers, you got to catch the ball. Running backs, you got to run. Quarterbacks, if you throw the ball to the other team, son, that's an interception. Now, offensive line, what you got to do is you got to go over there and you got to block those defensive linemen. Now, defense, listen, if the other team doesn't score, we win. Like, I kid you not, somehow he found a way to make that 30 minutes. Every Friday, every halftime, if we were up, he'd come in the locker room. His breakdown was, now defense, we could be a half a point, a decimal. I know it's impossible, but I'm just giving you the exaggeration.
Yeah.
If we were up, he came in and said, "Now defense, if the other team don't score, we win," and he walks off. And you're sitting here like my first year, I'm like, man, I'm thinking I'm playing for this legend, this guru, this man over here giving us the simplest shit I've ever heard in my life. But then as I got older and I matured, I realized that's how genius him, the guys like John Madden, a lot of those guys are. See, what we found is the way to show that you have knowledge is to be pretentious and try to lord it over and use language that nobody really understands. When the reality of the situation is, if you can't, I've heard this, if you can't teach it to a fourth grader, you don't really understand it. And that's what Bobby did. So how did I know Bobby? So every Thursday, Bobby had his Bobby Bowden call-in show. For every Thursday, he would come in and do this. He would call us in before our coaches got us and we did our conditioning or whatever we needed to do. He'd be like, all right, man, I got to go do that TV show. Let me see y'all later. So I'm literally for like my junior and senior year, I'm on a knee in the front, and I'm like, he's like, all right, man. I'm like, you gotta go do that TV show, huh? And he was just like, and so he'll get to the point where he'll be like, all right, Coleman, and I'd be like, I gotta go do that TV show, huh, coach? And then I wasn't Coleman, I was Coley.
Okay.
And that's what he would say, and God getting the same thing against Florida 03. I had a broken hand. I knew off season I was going to have shoulder, my right shoulder repaired and my left. I never got my left, but we got the right shoulder repaired. So I was banged up and still had to play.
Yeah.
But I played with a broken hand the whole game, and I think I missed a block on Channing Crowder, and Billy Sexton cussed me out really bad. Like, I love Billy Sexton to death. That was my position coach, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't have a hand. And then they stepped on my other hand. So my right hand is broken, which I'm right-handed. My left hand is now swollen 3 times the size of what it normally is because I had somebody step on it with their full weight on my cleat, and I don't have shoulders. And I'm playing fullback, a position where you literally have to go run into people. And I don't know how I did it, but whatever. I was stupid, young and stupid. But
cross your arms,
Bobby comes over and taps me on my shoulder and says, it's okay, Coleman. Now listen, son, this is what I want you to do, right, Coleman? Coleman, I need you to go find one of those guys with that blue shirt. And I need you to run full speed. Just pick one. Just run full speed into the guy with the blue shirt and say, that's a block. If you do that, you're going to be okay, all right? And I'm like, thank you. Thanks, coach. Like, that thought never occurred to me to go run full speed into the guy. But and what made it real was 4 years after my last game. They played here in the Gator Bowl. I live in Jacksonville, Florida.
Yep.
And one of the cool things is you get to go chance to go see the guys practice, and all of those guys. Dexter Carter was there, and Billy was no longer there, but I knew some of the guys who were coaching. And when I walked up to Coach Bowden, Coach Bowden said, "Coley, is that you? Boy, I ain't seen you in so long. What are you doing here? You don't live in Jack. You're from Tallahassee, ain't you? How's your sister doing? She still doing track? That's good, boy. I sure could use another one of you, man. Ah, boy, you got any more eligibility?" And then another guy, Bradley Jennings, who most Florida State fans know him more recently because of his sons. And this is what I didn't play with Bradley. Bradley was right before I got there, but this is how I knew Bradley was that guy. You don't pick your nicknames; they give you a nickname. Not the coaches, the player. Bradley's nickname was Monster, and Bobby said, "Monster? Oh boy, I ain't seen you in so long." And I was like, "Damn, Bradley, you must have been that guy." Bobby calling you Monster, and not Bradley, you was that guy. But yeah, because everybody else is boy. Like, you have to think, how many black number 36s has Coach Bowden seen over the course of this time? I wasn't like, you got to be some kind of arrogant to just believe he's going to know who you are. But he did know who his playmakers were, and it was really, I ain't gonna lie, man. My confidence was my head already big. It had to grow 3 sizes when Coach Bowden recognized me 4 years later.
I was gonna say, speaking of that, we found I was looking up your stats, and that's a source. And most guys, I think, as we get older, the hairline starts to back up a bit. But I don't know if you knew this picture was on the internet, but just while we're sharing memories. NoFan.org does have Big Game James before the hair.
Let me tell you this. So
Micah Pittman's cup.
I'm sorry, we don't have to keep that in if you don't want to. I just thought before I just
no, that's fine because people look me up and kids that I've trained or influenced, they're like, Coach, you didn't tell us you didn't have hair, and I'm like, well, no, that's not quite true. I had hair 3 minutes before that picture was taken. I had a huge afro, and what happens is, let me try to figure out the best way to call it. I don't believe in. We didn't have hazing. Hazing was illegal and highly frowned upon. What we had was program and tradition building. So one of the traditions was Bobby was an old school guy, believed in the clean cut look, and so you had to come in and you had to have a clean cut when you came in as a freshman. So what we did was the older guys gave us an opportunity to make sure that our hair was properly placed. Unfortunately, they cut designs and carved things into your head, so it's not a clean balding. So what happened was my afro, if you can see it, my hands here was about out to here when I came in. They cut me a mohawk to about right here, directly down my head, and it was a thin mohawk, about that thin. So it didn't have enough structure to stay up. So I looked like a captured dolphin. Like, if you ever seen like the dolphins or the whales and their dorsal fin is over, that's what I looked like. And they snatched the damn clippers from us. So like we had to go scour and find clippers. And I didn't have the worst. Thomas Clayton, who a lot of Florida State fans wouldn't know, because again, that's why I laugh about the transfer portal stuff, because it's been happening since forever. It happened with us, but Thomas ended up transferring out, going to Kansas State. I think he got drafted by the San Francisco 49ers. He was a 4-star running back. He just couldn't beat out Leon or Lorenzo. And he had, like, he really took care of his hair. Like, he processed it. Like, he had like an S curl, and he didn't want to shave his head. And he tried to fight, God rest the dead, Todd Williams with the Clippers. And let me tell you, they talk about Indians scalping people. I saw an 18-year-old boy get scalped that day, and I learned I'm from a tough neighborhood. I've never been afraid to back down from a fight, but I also understand when to hold them and when to fold them. You can't fight everybody, man. You gotta, it's just here. Trust me, I got dreads that come down to my ass. It grows back. It grows back.
There's a big difference between high school strong and college national champion contender weight program strong.
Right, weight class right there.
I took a friendly chest punch, like very just like this much movement from Cam Irving, and I thought I was gonna die. So that's, I mean, it was literally just a, hey Max, how's it going? Like, just gave me a little, hey, how's it going? Like, he probably didn't even realize he'd moved his arm, and I thought I was my chest had caved in. I
not envy. I really don't understand the boldness of some fans when they like go over the top. Like, you suck. I get those things. That comes with the territory. Sure. But when they really challenge former athletes like in their prime, because you get some of these guys like
I like the videos of all the guys that like thought it was a good idea to like put their hands up to run our tests, and you're like, that's a 6'8"
that's the perfect example.
Basketball player in the National Basketball Association. What are you about to do? So yeah, when you see drunk 50-year-old dudes who like you're saying, it's when they say, oh, you suck because you're mad you lost the game. When you see those guys though that take it to that next level, where it's like, dude, do you actually think if you hop that railing, this would end well for you? Like, how do you see, like, in your mind, who do you think you are, and who do you think you're?
You got to be logical. To play at a high level, even your Myron Rolls, we're slightly touched. And I'm willing to admit that now in my life. But to do that, you kind of, again, like I play with a broken, like, if I did, I would never do that. But like then, I play with a broken hand, like, and willingly went and ran into other people. Like, you got to
you have to have a little bit of a screw loose.
Yeah, it's got to be something wrong with you.
There's got to be something with you, because that's just a lot to ask of somebody.
So
especially
who was the freaky, like, so you've been on the field, and again, folks, for those of y'all who don't know, Big Game James Coleman was our fullback from 02 to 04. Or 01 to 02 to 04, right? Or were you
05. 05. The 06 Orange Bowl was my last game.
So And I do want to get to this at one point. Some people may still refer to that as the start of the lost decade, but now we've seen what a real lost decade looks like. So you were on the field with 5-star recruits, national championship contenders, guys that were dudes. Who was the freakiest athlete you ever saw in person? Or I mean, it could be someone that you saw every day on the team, but like, who was the guy that just made you go, yeah, that guy's built different?
Well, I'll give two things. Well, three. One would be a teammate, and I did have some really, really good teammates. Leon Washington just was phenomenal. I think he's a great that won't get his due because of how good the backfield was. He was after Greg Jones and things like that. And then like what we did in 2004, where he ran for like 996 and Lorenzo ran for like 925. Like we almost had 1,000-yard backs. And I think I was over a buck that year on the ground as well. So, or close to it. It was just like, it was a pretty decent group. But like Anquan Boldin, my freshman year, was probably one of the freakiest athletes I've ever seen.
Dude,
his combination of explosiveness, his aggressiveness, how strong he was, how good his hands were. He was he was a freak.
So I'm glad you brought him up, because I looked him up the other day just because I like to read about, former players. And I'll admit, so I was born in 92, right? So he was being recruited when I was 5, 6 years old.
Right.
I didn't realize he'd been a quarterback at Pahokee. And
he was Mr. Florida in basketball and football.
Dude, he accounted for 56 touchdowns his senior year. 56 touchdowns. Like that, he threw for 26, ran for 20. And you got to think, if he's scoring that many touchdowns, he probably didn't play most fourth quarters. Like, so he's scoring 4.5 touchdowns a game, playing probably 3 quarters. Like that, yeah, that's something else. And that actually brings me, I'm glad that we got on this train, because I had an interesting question for you that I want your take on. You, I think, played football in the right era for who you were, right? When the fullback was still prominent. And we have a good friend, Danny Wheeler, who does our gambling episode, also a former collegiate fullback. And he eulogizes the fullback position all the time.
Yep.
But who do you think you played with that maybe played in the wrong era? And what I mean is, like, I always wondered, what could Michael Vick have done in a spread offense, right? With the
Lorenzo
RPO?
Booker.
Okay.
Lorenzo Booker, hands down. Lorenzo Booker and then Peter Wart both played in the wrong era. Pete
Interesting.
was a guy that they tried to make a number one wide receiver, which he was in college. But, and this isn't disrespectful, Pete's a really good friend of mine.
Sure,
and
yeah,
Pete will tell you the same thing. But Pete's not a dig. He's not a post. He's not a takeoff guy. He's not, you want him to run a slant, make somebody miss, and then accelerate. In today's game, he would be a perfect slot receiver. And Lorenzo we used him wrong. USC showed us how to use Lorenzo with what they did with Reggie Bush. And again, it's a slot. He was a guy that you want in space, not necessarily running in between the tackles, even though he could do that. I think Nick Maddox is another guy who had a similar build too as well that was there. So I think those guys were, if they played now, we would they would be exponentially more valuable in breaking the bank with their skill set. But my bad. To go back to what you were asking me about before, though. The University of Miami has the other two that I've ever seen. One of them was Sean Taylor.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I never really had to hit Sean Taylor, but just watching what he was able to do, he was a guy that we always had to account for, and a guy that I had to go blow for blow, and then I got a chance to do some stuff with him in New Orleans would be John Vilma. And it was more so, I went from watching John Vilma almost kill 2 men back-to-back plays against Nebraska in the national championship, to going up against him at 17, well, just turning 18 years old, 19, but he was so damn fast. Like, it's literally like I know if he runs full speed.
Yeah.
Like we ran the sweep one time with Greg, and he was literally at my spot before I could get there. Like, and
That's
it's
horrifying.
just like nothing. There was nothing I could do physically with that. Now, ISO, it was some tools that we had. Like, so I cut block him the first. I always cut block.
I was gonna say there's certain things that are penalties for blockers now that maybe weren't
Right.
illegal back then.
So like Vilma ran a 4.3. I don't run a 4.3. I've never thought about running a 4.3. I know what it looks like. I can train you to run a 4.3, but it's not at my physical. I'm a Hemi.
Well, you can
I'm
run
not
a 4.3.
a
You're just
B12.
not going to make it all 40 yards. You'll
Right,
run for
right,
4.3 seconds.
Yeah, I can run for 4.3 seconds, but I ain't gonna be done for 40.
It's not going to be a 40.
So my philosophy was, if you run that 4.3 into this hole, I'm gonna cut you. You're gonna be head up. You're gonna be end over end, like your head's gonna hit the ground before you get it. Now you run that 4.7 in there, 4.7 220, 4.7 250. I like my odds. So like it was one of those things, but just how him and DJ. And, oh my bad, DJ Williams. DJ Williams is the only person that best me on live TV. And I was whooping his ass in 03. Like, I mean, I was getting it. I was getting it in, feeling myself. Little 19-year-old with milk on his tongue still. And on the goal line, I went in with a little bit too much confidence and did not come with my mind right. And I ran full speed to engage him. And when I tell you, he didn't run me over. He literally dipped and lifted me, and I flew back 5 yards, and I landed in the same position that I engaged him. And I looked at my hands like my hands betrayed me. Like it was something
like Little Giants, like he's looking at his hands.
Yeah.
Like, why?
And like Billy Sexton's running on the field. Like I swear, Greg gets the ball and he's like, "Wait a minute, I've never seen a fullback in flight." And he's like looking at me. Then he gets tackled, and Billy's like, "Rah rah 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 rah." He's cussing me. I'm like, "What you want me to do?" Man, I'm 19 years old. Man, that's a grown ass man out there. And I got it's just like I went from being
call
super
the NCAA.
confident.
Tell him this 3-year bullshit needs to go. Send him to the NFL.
Yeah. Right. So it's but yeah, those Miami teams were unreal, man. Like I like to be real with you, like people say what they want to say about the lost decade, but I played against 13 first rounders on defense against the University of Miami. That's not including the offensive guys. It's not like your Andre Johnsons of the world, your Eric Winstons, your guys. And that's not even
like
the second and third round.
You were there too. So like,
Here's what pisses me off about the lost decade thing. And look, we all talk about it. I will say this until the day I die. People have heard it on this program. Chris Ricks is one of my favorite players of all time. I mean, he was the first quarterback I remember having the poster on my wall. Like, I mean, he got there when I was 9, right? Like that. My dad. Do you remember this? Like, y'all used to have that. It was like the last spring practice. There'd be like a big cookout or whatever.
Yeah. Like, steaks and all that stuff. Man.
Yeah. So my dad used to volunteer and do the grilling there. So then we got to go there, which was pretty cool. And like he was the first FSU quarterback I'd ever met, and I remember that. So people forget like Chris Ricks is a grand total of 3 feet of field goals from being at least 2 and 3 against Miami, possibly, and then he's like 2 more drop balls from being 4 and 1. So like the 0-2 game I was talking about before we recorded, that was a 27-28 game that, him driving us from the 46 into field goal range is the only reason, we had the opportunity to kick.
And that's on Jeff Bowden. And I love Jeff Bowden, but like I think Jeff Bowden is a great guy, but he wasn't a good offensive coordinator. And we were in a situation where Greg Jones ran for 200 yards in the first half. We were up.
Yep. You
don't prove your point against Miami. Like you take your ball and you go home. And that's what we should have done, and we didn't. And they came in those so I was 1-4 against Miami. Mm-hmm. And we lost all those games by less than 1 score each time. Most of them by a field goal, like you said. It was just very competitive. Really, really good teams. Very good athletes. Neither team the greatest coached schematically, offensively, but defensively. You had greats. You had Randy Shannon in his prime. You had Mickey Andrews in his prime. Like you had guys that are iconic. Like honest to God's truth, it's very weird and difficult for me to see Randy Shannon at Florida State. And I have tremendous respect for Randy Shannon. Randy Shannon came on my high school campus, but Florida High was on FSU's campus, decked out in orange and green to come in and lie to me. Like he lied, and I say a lie. All coaches lie, but he said I reminded him of John Vilma, and I'm like, no, not John Vilma. Ray Lewis at the time. Ray Lewis was like my favorite linebacker, and I'm like, that's a great lie. I'm going to take this, but I know you're not taking it.
I just had one last football one. In no way saying anything bad about your brothers and your teammates, because like it wasn't the players, but we think about the lost decade and kind of it just compared to the 90s, it started to go downhill. Like looking back with as a more mature adult who's coached kids, who has children, like, were there any signs while you were there that like, hey, maybe there's cracks in the foundation, or was it kind of as like dramatic of a flip as it seemed to the fans? Like, it doesn't have to be bad. I as a fan, I've never really understood like when did the turn happen. I don't know.
It's real easy. It's like this. Well, one, the only kryptonite for Mickey Andrews was the spread offense. Okay. So he did not like the 4-3 hybrid, or the Tampa 2 defense, which Mickey basically invented, which the Buccaneers ran when they won their Super Bowl, with the middle linebacker that basically dropped into a third to cover the middle third of the field. It didn't go for the spread, especially when you had a 235, 245 pound middle linebacker that has to guard guys that are shifty in space. Like, in the way in the spread isn't like they're adapting it to NFL principles, but it's hard. Like for people who've never paid attention, I want you to really look at the college game, look at the NFL game, and the difference is the hash marks. The hash marks are way, way wider in college, so you actually can't spread somebody out. It's depicted upon where the ball is placed. In the NFL, the hash marks are so close, and that's where you have to line things up with the ball. It doesn't really matter. You can't really spread guys out because everything is dictated based upon the hash marks. So I think that's really where Mickey kind of like took a dive, not dive, and then on top of that, they were still pretty good. But what Bobby did was what I would do in the same situation as a father. Now, I don't appreciate it as a player per se, but I appreciate it as a father. When I came in, our class was the number 1 class in the nation. I think the year before that, they were number 1. I think 3, 4. Like, Bobby told us on our freshman intake that we were going to probably play for 3 national championships, and go on and you'll have every opportunity to make money. So that was his mindset. So like, you got the talent, you've got a son who's been here for a while. You place him in that situation. All we got to do is play for 1 national championship, and now Jeff Bowden is the hottest coaching. Right. So you're putting your son in a position to become a head coach, and it just didn't work out for us. Like, again, we ran into the greatest collection of talent that Miami's ever had. We and I'm gonna go into this because I want everybody to understand the position that I take, and I know there's a lot of people want to slap, but I won't. But there's a lot of people who take things that I say out of context. And when I say the standard is the standard, which is what Mike Norvell says, it's based upon what was there. Nobody let us off for having Jeff Bowden when I was there. They expected us to win. The former players expected us to win, and the fans expected us to win. And the fans were really, really hard. Like, I won't say names, but like I was telling somebody today, I saw a guy get hit in the back of the head with an orange after we lost to Miami. Like, people can talk about, they talk mean to me on Twitter. You ain't never, like, we had to go to class during all of this time. So like, mean words don't mean nothing to me, but
it's why sorry to interrupt, but it's why I will always boo the refs on a bad call, and I encourage all of you to do the same, because in all seriousness, like, it's hard to have 80,000 people expressing their disapproval for you. I don't care how tough you are,
especially when you're that young.
It's got to suck being on the field.
You got to learn how to deal with it, but like, it comes with it. When we won, it was phenomenal. It was a great time to be in Tallahassee, and we just lost some games. But like, when we lost to North Carolina State, I think we only lost to them my freshman year, but they lost to them the year before that. Let's think about who that was on that North Carolina State team. Phillip Rivers, T.A. McClendon, who, if you don't know who T.A. McClendon is, look him up. He was one of the guys that was about to challenge the NFL rule about leaving early. He was a phenomenal running back at NC State. I can't remember. Jericho Cotchery, who played for the Jets at wide receiver. Mario Williams, Manny Lawson, Tank. I forgot Tank. Basically, they had 4 first-round draft picks on the D-line. We played against the greatest North Carolina State team in the history of North Carolina State, and it was battles. These guys are losing to just regular-ass North Carolina State. You see what I'm saying? Like, so that's the difference. When we lost to Maryland, we lost to Sean Merriman's Maryland. We lost the games we lost. They have iconic players that will probably go into the College Football Hall of Fame, or they had great pro careers. And we were held to a standard because we were Florida State, and that's why we went to Florida State. If I wanted to just have fun and play football, I would have won the FAMU. And there's no disrespect to FAMU. I went to FAMU, joined the frat, enjoyed the college experience. I went to Florida State where I didn't get done with my commitments until 9 p.m. every night. I still had a ball. Don't know how I had time, but it's just, it is what it is. It's what you sign up for. Like why I went to, and you go because the talent's going to be, you're going to play against talent, you're going to practice against talent week in and week out. And you also know that you're going to be held to the standard of the people who were there before you. No matter what position you play, do you know how difficult it is to be considered top 10 at any position at Florida State? Top 10 fullbacks? It's a who's who of fullbacks. Top 10 wide receivers. Top 10 quarterbacks. Like, our worst quarterbacks are guys like you would consider like Danny Cannell, Brad Johnson. These guys who all went to the NFL and had pretty damn good, pretty decent careers. Right. Played years. It's just like Corey Fuller is phenomenal hire for Florida State, but how many fans really remember Corey? Like, Corey Fuller came on me and Freddie Stevenson's podcast and said nobody really remembers me from Florida State. They remember me for playing 10 years in the NFL. He's not even top 10 corner in Florida State history and played 10 years in the league. Yep. Like, that's why I don't understand. Like, the standard ain't got nothing to do with who's the coach. The standard has everything to do with the people who bled sweat on that field, who came before you and made you want to come to Florida State. Even during the lost decade, we had cats. The lost decade would blow these teams out, and it's not because of talent. I told when I think it was Taggart's first year, Ernie Sims had a football camp in Tallahassee, and I took my son to it, and I went to work it. I seen Amari Gaynor, Jaden Woodby, a couple other guys, and I told them, in my era, we would boat race you guys. It is not because we're more talented. It has nothing to do with talent. You guys are way more talented than us. We just were more mentally developed. We really we really was trying to we was trying to really change situations, man. Like, the way I grew up, and my mother was phenomenal in what she was able to do. My grandmother was phenomenal in the fact that she was able to support what we did. So I didn't have it as hard as everybody else in my neighborhood. But I lived in the projects. I lived in the hood. I grew up in the hood. And I remember there was times when we didn't have meat to eat, let alone bad meat. We just didn't have meat. I remember walking up the street to go ask for some bread and some peanut butter for my best friend's family so that we could get through until my mom got paid. It's like, I wasn't going back. When I went to Florida State, that's what when I rolled out of my bed, part of my scholarship check went to my mother to pay bills. Like, I had a kid. I was coming out there and I was trying to harm you because that's the only way that I knew to change my family situation, was to get this damn degree and to run through your face mask so that somebody would pay me money to go play on Sundays, or I could better my situation because of the way that I played the game, and people will remember it. And I'm still eating to this day off of that stuff. So I don't know if these guys have that sense of urgency or what happened. I can't judge them. I just don't see it.
First of all, thank you for sharing your background, because I think it's great context. But I think there's also another side of you're a person who clearly anything you do, you want to do to the best of your ability, because that represents you as a man. So even there's no way to know, right? But I almost think that no matter if you hit the lottery tomorrow, you're the guy that would be at work the day after tomorrow doing your best job. You would be, you'd be like a Jackie Chan, right? Who said, yeah, my kids aren't getting a trust fund. I'm donating my money because I didn't have a trust fund, but I'm going to teach them how to make their own money if they want. So even if they don't have that motivation, maybe of the urgency, how do you just communicate that back to them of do things the best you can, because you're representing first yourself, but also this great legacy that you talked about? How do you think Norvell can get that message through to these teams and get them to play to that standard?
And do you think he's the right guy to do it also, or do you think it should be
I think Mike can be. I don't get caught up in the I've never in the things that I've written and things I say. I have a daily radio show, so I talk a lot. So there's a lot of things to be on there, but you'll never find a segment or an article where I've ever asked for a coach to be fired. I don't believe in that per se. Now, I may be fed up. I like Jimbo in the production, but I was a little fed up with the way he left. But I can respect it a little bit more now. I kind of get it a little bit more. I never asked for Tag to be hired or fired. The only thing I've always said, and I still stick to this, I do not believe coaches should be fired before 3 years. I believe that that's just, it's impossible to know what would have happened. Like, you didn't even get a chance to get your full classes in. So is Mike the guy or not is irrelevant, because I'm going to support whoever the head coach is, and to my damnedest. But I think what Mike hasn't had the opportunity to really do outside of 1 year is be able to live up to his open door policy, which he really does have an open door policy. You, as a former player, you can't come in there and you can chop it up with him. Every time I've met Mike, it's been very good, very cordial. I actually really enjoy talking to Mike. Like, talking to Mike Norvell, like, will get you hyped. Like, he's an energy guy.
Yep.
How I think, and I was actually with one of my former teammates, Leroy Smith, and we were just discussing this. Like, just talk to former players and you'll hear the passion and the intensity in their voice about Florida State.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere down the line that was lost, and it's a lot of guys who are grateful for the opportunity, but that's it. They're not grateful for the opportunity to leave a legacy for the next generation. So, funny story. After the 2003 season, we won 10 games, lost to Miami twice, and some ESPN Classic games. And then we had the debacle that PK Sam blames Bobby for against Clemson, where we were like, if we beat Miami earlier that year with a couple questionable calls, or we beat Clemson, you know what we're doing in the beginning of the lost decade? We're playing in the national championship.
Yeah,
that's how close we were. But in the next year, if we make a field goal against Maryland, we go into the Florida game with a little bit different, and we're probably playing in the national championship. But we had a meeting, so when people say, James, you're really, really hard on these guys, let me tell you why I'm really hard on these guys. We won 10 games. Like, right now, we won 10 games. They'll throw a freaking parade in Tallahassee. But we won 10 games, ACC championship, all of that jazz. We get called to a special meeting, players only meeting. When we go in, it is the who's who of who've played at Florida State at that time.
Interesting.
I saw Deion. That was the first time I ever met Deion Sanders. I was like, wow, that's prime. Prime is here. Like, all these guys, you grew up. They cussed us out for 2 hours. They told us how bad we were, how lucky we were to have what we had, how we're messing up their legacy, how we're tarnishing their image, and blah, 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 and a whole bunch of other stuff. Now, at 19 years old, I was extremely offended. I was mad. And we talked to them a little bit about how they never come around, and there was some reasons why, and some of those reasons are still here to this day. But my point is that, and now as a dad, so I have my daughter in college, so like, it was, and I'm not misogynist, and people say whatever they want to say. I love my baby girl to death. She the only person who would tap my pockets whenever she wants to. But I've only wanted to have a son. Like, you can see it on Twitter. Like, if you I call my youngest my favorite, and he is, because he hugs me and he's loving right now. He's a badass. He reminds me more of parts of my personality that I like. But the franchise, the boy who has my name, nothing made me feel better. My son told me once, Dad, and I'm gonna say that. Hopefully, I don't get you guys. I'm black, so I should be able to say this. He said, because these young kids don't have an understanding of how far back history was, right? So he said, Dad, back in slavery when you played at Florida State and you guys were good, like, people wanted to go there, but like, I like LSU and I like Odell Beckham and I liked it. Do you understand how much of a gut punch that is to hear your likeness? The kid, your pride and joy, the kid who has your name, tell you that he's not a Florida State fan. He's a fan of other people because they're not any good. So I rewound back and I thought about those guys coming and talk to us. They all had kids, and their kids aren't seeing the representation of Florida State that they told their kids was Florida State. My son is not seeing the representation of Florida State that he's been birthed into and that he knows. And that's why, again, it really means something. Like, I wanted to play to make sure that that next kid that wants to come to Florida State was going to watch me. He grew up watching me or others who I was around in my era, and I want that to be the reason. So I think that's what's missing. I think if we, and I said this, It's not that his open door policy isn't effective. It's not that we're not welcome back. It's that we're not asked back. Certain guys are asked back, but and rightfully so. Derek Brooks, phenomenal person. Charlie Ward, salt of the earth person. Not a person in this world. Probably the only person, if you ever saw me in a room, I won't curse. I do not curse around Charlie Ward out of reverence and respect. Peter Boulware, oh yeah. First time I ever saw a Black American Express car was with Peter Boulware. Peter Boulware is an entrepreneurial magnet. Those are the guys that are dope, but those are the guys that were the iconic players. Peter Ward himself as well. But those aren't the only guys that can come and relay what it was like. 90% of those players will never be on that kind of status, but a lot more of them could be James Coleman. The reality is a lot more of these guys may get some coffee and beignets like I did in New Orleans in the NFL, but they're going to become dads. They're going to become entrepreneurs. They're going to come into the community. They're going to be the representation of your football program in that manner. And what you need to do is let these guys understand the mindset that went into making us who we are. Like you talk about the success, and yes, it was birthed coming from a little bit of hardship, but it was also birthed by the fact that I had no choice. There was no second option. There was no coming back to my mama's house. My mama, like to be honest with you, like I walked on, but it was more of what they consider a blue shirt now than a walk on. I didn't do what I was supposed to do in the classroom. That was the main reason why I didn't get recruited. I lost a ton of scholarships once they thought I wasn't going to be eligible. But when I went in there, my mom said, now I could have went to a D2 school or lower school where they could have like accepted my grades. But my mom said, if this is what you want to do, son, I ain't got nothing past 6 months for you. I can help you a little bit, but once you step out this house, there's no safety there. You'll always be my son. I'll always love you, but this is what you got to do. So like, when you go out there and that's your mindset, it's a completely different world. Mat drills also embody, like I joke with people, like I view my life's problems on a scale of 0 to mat drills. If it's harder than mat drills, I ain't got no business doing it. The only thing harder than mat drills was COVID for me. Like COVID kicked my ass. I thought I was going to die, but even mat drills was what got me through COVID. Like I see they do the what do you call it, tour duty stuff, and that's, don't get me wrong, that's hard. Like if any of us went out there and tried to do it, we would die.
Yeah, pretty much.
It ain't mat drills. Like mat drills is like Ash. I promise. Like any guy that you get on, say, hey, tell us about mat drills. And mat drills was literally hell on earth. Like no, it was cool because it taught you that the end goal was championships, and that nobody cares. You have a role and you have a responsibility. No matter what happens in front of you, you have to do your job. So I'm gonna put this like this is a perspective. One of the times, the guy in front of me literally threw up in our spot. But that's my spot. I don't get to say, ew, there's throw up there. Trainer, can you clean this up? Coach, can I move a little bit to the left, move a little bit to the right? That's your spot. Get it done. Coach, I'm slipping because somebody threw up. Nobody cares. We did not ask you that. Your job is to do what we tell you to do. It's to the best, and not just what we tell you to do. You must will the person to your left and the person to your right through this, and that's why. So again, people who think like it's just all shucks, man. This man was maniacal, and it was dope. It was great, and it was great. It was great training for young men, and it put us in a position to where we had to lose ourselves. And I think that's really where it comes down to. Football, to make it to the NFL, you have to be somewhat selfish. And I get that. Nobody comes to Florida State because they want to be Rhodes Scholars. You come to Florida State to go to the NFL. It's always been true. It's still true to this day. That being said, you have to be able to deny a little bit of what your personal goals are for the collective goals of the group. And that's what things like mat drills, that's what a lot of our off-season training was about. And that's why so many of us are friends, even though we don't have to talk every day. But when we get together, man, the things that brought us together, like mat drills and some of the tough games, is what we're going to always remember to our dying days. And I think we got to get back to that a little bit. And I think they will, but there's some other some admin stuff that we've got to do a better job as a fan base to really focus on and stop allowing them to get off the hook. Yeah. I'll say this and I'll let you move on. Like, imagine if Bobby Bowden got the indoor practice facility that he asked for in 1996, how much better Florida State would be. So when I hear about football-only facilities and they stopped building it because tag sucked or whatever, that's BS. You don't if boosters, I'll give my money when it no, that's not how Alabama does it. That's not how Georgia does it. That's not how these other schools do it. They do it because they want to win in football. And facilities win, money matters. You gotta grind. And I think that's really where, I've seen a lot of excuses over the last couple of years. Doesn't mean you hate the people there. It just means that, hey, I'm about results. Nobody, my mortgage, it don't matter what happened. When I was in the hospital for 10 days and couldn't work for damn near a month, my mortgage company said, hey, man, that's tough, man. I hope you get better. Matter of fact, I think they sent me flowers. And they also sent me my mortgage. So they also say, hey, bro, you still on the hook for this. I laugh at a lot of people, and I say some of their football takes makes it difficult for me to do business with them because another Mike Norvell quote, how you do anything is how you do everything. So if this is how you let people off the hook for this with football, I can only imagine what you do if I gave you my finances. Like, nah, bro. Yeah. If I give you $20,000 and you come back and tell me it was COVID, you're gonna have to see me. You ain't gonna want to see them problems. I will say this: attitude reflects leadership. Another Bobbyism. You got to approach each play with a reckless abandon and total disregard for personal safety. He literally said that a million times in my 4 years, and I mean, I'll tell my son. It's only I coach an I-9 flag football team. This team, and they bullied me into coaching it, and I don't want to because I understand kind of times if the parents have changed. Like Bobby also said this, the kids haven't changed.
Right.
The parents have changed. The people have changed around the kids. So if you hold them to sound redundant, but if you hold them to a standard, they will rise and fall to what your level of expectation is. If you tell them it's okay to fail, they will fail. If you create a climate that's where it's not okay to fail, then guess what people aren't going to do? They aren't going to fail. And that was what the climate was. So that doesn't mean that it's not okay to lose. You can learn in that, but it's not. But you're going to, so when we lost, it was damn near track practice the next day. We weren't going in and they were just like, oh, it's okay. We'll get them next week. We just aren't good as them. No, we had punishments. Oh, matter of fact, every week the defense, and I told Coach Fuller this when I first met him, and this was crazy. He could not believe this is what Mickey used to do. The boys started off with 8 gassers. They start off with 8 gassers. Now they can get them. There was 8 goals that the defense had to hit every week. So you hit each goal, you get a gasser knocked off. So in theory, let's say with Florida State lost, I think we lost to North Carolina State this year. We lost to Wake Forest. Wake Forest was a worse loss. So we lost to Wake Forest. The defense would have had 8 gassers. Now, here's what they do. Every play they log. If you have a missed assignment, that's a gasser. If you have a loaf, which means you didn't give championship effort, that's a gasser. If something bad happened, you got a gasser. In theory, you can make a play, but if you didn't do it the way Coach Andrews wanted you to do, you can still get 2 gassers associated to it. And when I told Coach Fuller, he said, okay, so on Monday practice, they ran conditioning. You ran conditioning. And then on Tuesday practice, you did your punishments. And I said, no, we did that on Monday's practice. So in theory, you could run 16 gassers. And what you were going to do is run those 16 gassers. Mickey was going to get every little piece out of you for that. And it wasn't considered, again, we have the 20-hour rule. You did not run those gassers because it was a part of practice. You ran those gassers because you were so upset with yourself because of your performance that you chose to go out there and allow Mickey Andrews to watch you do it for time. So, if you don't make the time, you know what you get an opportunity to do? Another gasser. Again. So these are the standards that people were held to, and you knew you were going to be held to these. And when you go out and you play, you better live up to these things. And I think that's what set the tone. And I think, again, the attitude of the leadership was to not accept anything less than your best. And they didn't recruit you because you were average. They recruited you not even to develop you. They recruited you because they felt you were the best possible person to put into that situation, and your job was to go take another potential NFL player's job. Like Michael Bulwer will admit that Ernie Sims gave him pause. And Michael Bulwer was like a 3-year starter at Florida State.
Yeah.
Like, and they brought in Ernie Sims to take his job. Every year they brought your replacement in. So like it's just, but like I said, yeah, it is a cultural mindset now. I think people have accepted things that they shouldn't accept, but at the end of the day, it's like, we were bullies from when I was birthed into a program that was known for being bullies, and right now, we got we got a lot of nice guys, and there's nothing wrong with being a nice guy. Like I tell my sons, I didn't grow up. My father, like each generation of James, is a little bit softer. Like my father was a hard ass from what I understand about him. I didn't grow up with him, but from the talks I've had, people tell me stories about when I was growing up about how rough I was or rough I wasn't. My son won't be like that, but at the same time, I tell them with my I-9 team, when we hit that field, there is no friends. I don't care if you're in school. That could be your best friend. Y'all could have got baptized together for all I care. He is the enemy, and our job is to make them submit to our will. We will beat them, but we will mercy rule everybody that we see. It's not my job to boost those kids' self-esteem. It's my job to worry about my team. It's my job to make kids cry. And I think if we had more of that, we would have more winning. If we had more coverage that held people to that standard, we would have more winning as well, as opposed to people who find every reason to make an excuse for these young men who are great young men, who I do believe are good, who I do believe have it in them. We just have to go in and let them know that, hey, dog, you are taking on a tradition of badassery, and you must be a badass. And I need you to be that so that my son sees that, and my son wants to emulate that.
This kid I wrestled with, Will Alford, said something that stood out, still stands out to me 15 years later. I remember I watched my coach, James Marshka, Childs High School, head wrestling coach still, just great guy, but he was tough as nails. I mean, he was a son of a bitch. I hated him in high school, obviously. And now he's someone I still look up to and admire. And I remember one time when I was a freshman, he chewed into Will Alford, one of the most naturally gifted wrestlers I've ever seen. I mean, laid into him, and I was kind of like, oh my God, like, how's Will going to react? And I remember the next day I said something to him about, man, Marshka, like, what was that about? He goes, that's what I expect from a coach. He goes, if I need to feel better, I've got a mom for that. I need my coach to I forget exactly what he said, but basically like, hey, I need my coach to smack some sense into me. I need my coach to, because I knew I should have won that match, and I knew I wrestled like an idiot, and I knew that, my cardio wasn't where it should be, and that's why I lost. And my mom will tell me I'm the greatest thing ever when I get home tonight. And like, we need more of that mentality where it's like, it's okay for your coach to be an asshole. If he gets great results, you're going to look back and say, yeah, but I'm a national champion. Like, anyway, let's move on to this year's football, but I just like brought up that fun memory, and
I know you say we want to get to the season, but just to preface that, one more thing. So my neighborhood that I grew up in, if you want to, so that was the day when people come get you out. You had 12 o'clock on Saturday. You could hear every door in my neighborhood slam after the cartoons were over, and parents kicked us out. You were outside. Yep. If I wanted to play basketball at the courts, where guys is from our age all the way up to 20-something. Now, luckily, I've been the same height since I was 10. So really, when I was 10 is when I really started like getting grown ass men bodying me, like putting me like. And what was I gonna do? I want to play. Am I gonna cry? And when I go home, and my mother and my grandmother, the way they raised me, it's just you going. I didn't have a male figure, so they figured that this is the only way. Are you going to cry, or are you going to go and do it? Like my mother's saying was, be so good that they can't deny you. And even I'm sorry. Like I was starting the entire 03 season, and I messed around and I read the War Chant message boards. I Googled myself. I wanted to see what people were saying. Oh my God. The other fullback got hurt, and they didn't realize that I was already starting. They talked about me so bad. Like I was
did you have a burner name? Did you almost make a burner name and respond?
Right. So I called my mom And I said, Mom, this is what they're saying about me. Her response was, they talked about Jesus. What makes you think they won't talk about you? It's not what I wanted to hear. So I called my second favorite person, my grandmother. My grandmother is one of the coldest, most nicest ladies you'll ever meet. And this is what my grandmother said, I quote. I said, Grandma, I read the message boards. They said I wasn't any good, blah, blah, blah. And my grandmother said, who told your dumb ass to read? They did not bring you there to read. They brought you there to hit people. If you don't like what they're saying, hit people more. And that's what we need more. We need more alumni Watkins. We need more grandmamas coming out there telling these boys that don't come to me with your tears. Because, again, and a lot of it just has to do with life. When I'm not at my best and I'm not having a great day, my tears do not pay bills. My kids are great kids, a little spoiled. They have expectations. The roof over their head, clothes on their back, good food. Their mother expects certain things. When I have my daughter, my daughter's mother expected every month to make sure that there was a certain amount of funds that was there because of that. If those funds were not there, nobody was sitting there feeling sorry for me not doing my job. That's not what meant. That's right. That's not. I mean, I know people like to talk about misogyny and men are too tough and blah blah blah. But nobody. The only time people love crying men is in movies and on TV shows. Your job as a man is to go out there and do your job and perform at a higher level, and that's really that's the beautiful thing about football. Just go out there and impose your will on somebody else, and everything else takes care of itself.
So I kind of want to give you the chance to have your little victory lap, like we said in the DMs, about how you felt about KZ out on the football field. So I kind of want to ask, like, what were you think were the core? Actually, Max was kind of in the same boat as you, actually, about JT
People
and KZ.
People literally acted like I was crazy when I was like, guys.
So what do you think was kind of the, I guess, core issue behind how 2022 fell out? And also, how do you feel how Mike has kind of addressed the needs kind of in recruiting in the portal to kind of like do them well? Because right now, the hot topic is that we're not going after a transfer QB, where we haven't landed the elite offensive linemen. So, like, how do you feel that 2022 played out, and how do you feel that Norvell's been addressing those needs probably by replenishing the roster?
I think 2022 was a year that we really missed a great opportunity. We missed a layup. And we missed the layup trying to worry about all the things that were not football related. Mm-hmm. And I'll go in and we'll start off with the Mackenzie Millen thing. And great story, great young man. I love it. I hope he gets into coaching. I think we need more people like that around. I have a hard time exalting. Like, so when you think about our fan base, guys who transfer out are scum of the earth. They're terrible people. Guys who transfer in are supposed to change our culture, but they left another program.
Dude, this is literally what I said. Sorry to cut you off, but like people acted like I was the worst human on earth last summer when I was like, he said he left because his best friend was Dylan Gabriel.
My best friends were, I love BJD to death. BJD is a great person. I think he's doing big things in Alabama back home as an engineering, but he was a redshirt freshman. I was a true freshman. We battled every year that I was there. Joe Surratt came in after me. I love Joe. I can love you and not want you to take my spot. I'd be damned if I'm giving anybody what I got. Like
if there's a way for both of us to eat, like if we can do an I formation and you can be fullback, I can be tailback, sure. But if there's one QB spot,
but there's only one way.
That's my way of the league.
There's only one way.
You're not taking it from me. I don't care how good of friends we are. Like, so to me, yeah, I always had a big issue with that. But
I think that's
feels that way.
And I remember when I first started saying Jordan Travis isn't as bad as what everybody says. It was, well, he ain't here no more. He's the biggest Jordan Travis fan in America. I got that from Kenny Dillingham.
Yep.
Kenny Dillingham is the one who told me that. Kenny Dillingham is the one who told me he had never seen KZ throw. And I'm like, how is everybody anointing somebody a starter that we haven't seen throw? And then I remember I got a lot of hate and flack because of the 2-second clip. And so just to let you people know, like, I made my money a lot of different ways, but how I made my money before media was in sports performance training. Mm-hmm. And I specialize in what they call reconditioning. I've probably trained about 250 people who have come off of ACL tears, who've come off of MCL tears, and getting them ready to go back. And what I saw was a lack of explosion. And it wasn't a knock on him. It was just he could not do what it is that was necessary at this level. And if his skill set was as good as what everybody was saying, Dylan Gabriel would not see the field. Right. And that's just the reality. Just from how good he was when they won their fake national championship. That's just me being observant. But I think they came in. Jordan Travis gave you every opportunity to win the Notre Dame game. We just could not get a stop. Mm-hmm. But what happened was when Jordan Travis got hurt, they pulled him out and they put McKenzie Milton in. McKenzie Milton had a great throw to I forgot who it was, but it was a great
Keyshawn.
Yeah, it was a great throw. Going back, it hung in the air a little bit, but it was good anticipation. They scored with Trayshawn Ward, I believe, scored the touchdown on that drive, or Corbin, whatever. We ran it.
Sure, they ran it. Yeah.
He had 40 yards. I think he had 47 yards total passing that game, 40 of which came on that drive. Mm-hmm. He had no touchdowns. He literally did absolutely nothing to keep you in that game. Jordan Travis is the one who kept you in that game, and it was Jordan Travis's legs and his ability. Now, there were a couple of things that happened. Two of the interceptions, one of them I've never seen before. Like when the guy came from the other hash to pick it off, like that's God's will, man. Like you can't, you're not supposed to have the backside safety intercept an out route. Like that doesn't happen. Like my man was running, he was moving. That guy would be a top 5 pick too, by the way.
Yeah.
So when that happened, everybody was in this McKenzie Milton love fest, and it was great. And had he capitalized on it the next week and we beat Jacksonville State, we moved on, man, it would have been ESPN. We would have been the darlings of ESPN. We would have probably got a Disney movie. Like, guy couldn't walk.
People, here's the thing, man. Like, people like fulfilling prophecies. They have since the ancient times. And I don't mean that to be flippant about Christianity. It's in my Twitter bio. I'm a devout Christian, but people love fulfilling prophecies, and that's on a macro and a micro level. People wrote this prophecy of McKenzie Milton, the one who would come in this program's most dire time of need, and that would turn us around and bring us back from the brink of death and revive it. And that's the narrative they wanted to see. So when they got a taste of it, right? Jordan Travis
was what we ran with.
And now McKenzie, and it drove me nuts the next week. Yeah, McKenzie Milton orchestrated that comeback. It's like, you mean the comeback that was initiated by the Jordan Travis's 60 yards of passing on an 80-yard touchdown drive? That comeback? The one where, okay, I'm just making sure we're on the same page. Like, and that's not a knock on McKenzie. It's just, I think that was the issue. What I am knocking, and I want your opinion on as a former player, is it's concerning to me that the coaches, Mike Norvell in particular, seemed to be prisoners of the moment once that narrative started to come to fruition.
That's what I was going to say.
Like you said with the message,
and that's what lost the locker room.
You got to block that shit out. Who cares if the fans are saying you should start KZ? You're the coach. So
So after all the losses, PK again, I'm not picking on my former teammate, but he said something right. The locker room was lost, and I want people to hear me in this. If we lose, what was it? It was a 3-game? Was it 4? How many games did we lose?
4 games.
We were 0-4.
If the locker room isn't in shambles, I question every man in that locker room.
If y'all had lost to an FCS team when you were there, would y'all have gotten out of that locker room without at least one fist fight?
No, I'm a perfect example. Well, I'll give you a great example. We played Miami 0-5. Mm-hmm. We won. Very tough. Quick turnaround. So I understand what happened with Notre Dame. We played Citadel. We had a terrible first half. I want to say either Citadel was beating us like 10-7, or we were winning 13-7 or 10. It was something like that. Mm-hmm. I lost my ever-loving mind on the offense. I cussed everybody slap out. I'm not saying that's why we ended up beating them by 60, like beating 60 to something or whatever. But what I am saying is that would have never flown in any aspect. Like I can agree that we aren't as talented as Georgia. We aren't as talented as Alabama. What I can't agree is we're not eons better than Jacksonville State. This wasn't even the best Jacksonville State team. The team the year before was better than this one. But we lost. But even when you go back and you look at last year's Jacksonville State team, we were losing that game when they didn't play until they played Jordan Travis. We put Tate Rodemaker in there who looked like he had never played football before. And we put everybody in besides him. And then which I think is what really kind of started making people like, why are you not playing the guy who's responsible for the only wins you have?
I want to
And
I want to
that's
not
the problem.
James, you're like a no bullshit guy, and I like to learn from y'all and ask these questions. We're in 2021, but how much of it do you think is him being a black quarterback and that just not be like? Do you think that plays into it, or do you think it's just the injuries? Like, because I don't know if I always read the subtext right, and I'm curious on
I
your
don't
opinion.
think it plays into this situation with
Okay,
Mike. I think maybe the fans' perception of him
that's
that
who I
plays
meant. The
into
fan,
it.
the
Yeah, I
perception
think
of
the fans'
Coleman.
perception. And again, like, so man, let me put this down. This is deep. People hear terms like privilege, white privilege, and they get immediately offended. Like, why? I
Mhm.
earned this. I work hard, and I'm like, that's not what that means.
Right.
We hear things like systemic racism, and they're like, well, we haven't had these principles or these things since like the Civil Rights Act, and I'm like, not really, just but hear me in this. Systemic means you don't know,
Hmm.
and it's embedded into the culture. So like, think about the NFL and how long it took for people it was as early as the mid '90s where people thought that black quarterbacks didn't have the mental capacity to play.
Right.
Now, there was no rule that said you couldn't do it, but there were rules for decades before that laid the foundation for how you moved. So what happens is that next generation and the generation after it becomes second nature.
It becomes the
So
norm. Brent.
yeah, you're not moving, like you're not trying. You don't even know what you're saying or what you're
Right.
doing. And so when they say he's using his legs and they're doing this and blah blah blah, and as a guy who I really what my the first thing I ever wanted to do in life, I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a
No, you
courtroom
don't.
lawyer.
No, you
I
don't.
don't. No, 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 no,
No, you
no.
don't.
You're
Trust
right.
me. I'm a
I
lawyer.
don't.
I'm
But what I'm
deep on
saying
it.
is, as a child, that's what I wanted to do. And then I saw how much my sister is in student debt loan, who is a lawyer, and I was like, thank God I did not do that, because I would lose my mind. But so when I'm debating people around a point counterpoint speech and debate type of thing, in which I was taught with Dr. Virtuno at Florida. So you bring your point up, I'm going to see your point, I'm going to respond with a counterpoint, and then I'm going to give my point. So James, what does all that mean? People tell me that we don't have the wide receivers that are necessary to compete. But then they tell me that Jordan Travis isn't a good quarterback. If we don't have the receivers that is necessary to compete, what makes you think putting another quarterback in is going to change those things? Now, you also say we don't have the offensive line to be
Right.
able to function at this point. Why is Jordan Travis successful at quarterback at Florida State? Because of his ability to run and the fact that the defense has to account for him in the zone read scheme in which
Right.
Mike Norvell is running at Florida State. It's not saying there's not a better quarterback out there. It's saying that Jordan Travis is the best quarterback that we have to run our system. Now,
Hmm.
some things that I've heard is that if we got a little bit better talent around him, he could possibly be a Heisman candidate. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. But I will say is that we don't have the guy that can, like, University of Florida beat the worst thing that happened to us was Dan Butler being fired because they went
Yep.
to a basic situation. And what
Yeah.
was crazy was they were able to beat us running straight man
Hmm.
and letting their front seven be better than us.
It was schoolyard. It was, hey, line up with someone,
Which,
point to them, and let's do it.
yeah,
Yep.
we're
No
we
schemes, no Tampa
can't
2,
beat.
no
Yeah,
Robert, just man on man.
no,
We
just
got
straight
this.
man. We could not beat man coverage. So I'm sitting there with my friend Sam, who had, at my lounge, at my cigar lounge, who has a great podcast, and
Buddy Sam
all
Moore.
these guys they're screaming, throw the ball, and I'm like, to who?
Right.
Who's open? Who is he going to throw it to? Let's go back to Mackenzie Milton. I'll say healthy, better passer. Mackenzie Milton had games where he had over 40 throws, and it was like 25 for 44 or something like that. But his yardage was like 180 some yards.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Like, that's not good.
Right.
Like, that means nobody's getting open. You're a check down shorty. So those are the things that I think people got to realize that. Again, they don't know why they're saying it, but again, a lot of people are saying the same things, and I'm inconsistent. They tell me Jordan Travis is the guy. I think Jordan Travis is the guy. The real problem is that we bashed Tag because Tag, rightfully so, Tag did not sign a high school quarterback in the 1 year that he had. Technically two. I'll give you 2 years that he had. The transition class and then his first class. He had Jeff Sims. They decided to not go in the direction with Jeff Sims. A lot of speculation. I know Jeff. I know Mike. I know the story. I've said it numerous times what happened. They brought in Chuba Purdy. They brought in Tay Rodemaker. It was either one of those guys were in. What good is it bringing in 2 high school quarterbacks if neither one of them can be the guy that can change your program? Neither one of them's not here. The other one isn't starting. You miss out on another guy. The next year, was
Altmaier.
Luke Altmaier.
Luke Altmaier. Yeah, Luke Altmaier. Now you get AJ Duffy, but AJ Duffy's not ready to come in and play. The bigger indictment isn't the transfer, is that in year 3, you don't have a quarterback that's been in your program for 3 years who can challenge the incumbent. Mm-hmm. That's how you get better. Like that's the real thing, and it's cool. Don't get me wrong. Transfer portal, great. The Jermaine Johnsons of the world, awesome. Fabian Lovett has been a great addition.
Yep.
Tons of great additions. But you can sign 25 to a class. He's had 3 classes. That means you've had the opportunity to bring in 75 players. And of the 75 players, which is, like I say, it's not that, but I'm just giving you the numbers. Not one of those guys that we are going to expect to make plays on Saturdays this fall are coming from somebody that Mike Norvell recruited out of high school. That is a problem of development.
So I was comparing the situation when you say because essentially the argument you're making, right, is let's look at the quality of quarterback, not just the number of quarterbacks he's brought in. I said, let's look at where Jimbo was going into year 3. He had first-round draft pick Christian Ponder being pushed from behind by future first-round pick E.J. Manuel. And now,
E.J. Manuel had Jameis Winston pushing his last year.
Imagine E.J. stays one more year. Let's just say for some reason the rules are you have to stay 5 years, and E.J. stays 1 more year, and you don't get that redshirting of Jameis. I don't know that E.J. starts, but also that he doesn't get drafted in the first round. You may have had a Jalen Hurts situation with like a 3rd or 4th round draft pick starting NFL QB sitting on your bench behind Jameis. And to your point, I know COVID, I know all that. Mike hasn't recruited a guy who, and I'm using the fans' words, I'm a huge Jordan Travis fan. Mike hasn't been able to bring in a high school guy who should be a rising junior now and should be able to compete with a guy who the whole fan base thinks isn't that guy. But
facts.
You know, it's also ironic.
No one's willing to say, "Hey, maybe this coach."
We kind of fired the last guy because he wasn't able to manage the QB room or bring anybody in, and then Mike is doing the same damn thing, but he's also getting a lot more consensus from Adam, who are kind of finally behind him. That's kind of also work I'm kind of irritated about.
Well, that's kind of back to our earlier conversation. I will say this directly: growing up in Tallahassee in the booster community, I think both things can be true. You had to get rid of Willie because financial commitments that were made were going to lose you more money than his buyout. But the school didn't make those commitments. James, we grew up in the same town. This goes to that stuff we were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. The rich white dudes on the north side of town with the big checkbooks are the ones that made those commitments, and they were the same ones threatening to pull the commitments. So, like, the school's hands were tied, in my opinion. I don't think the schools made a decision that was in any way motivated by race. But do I think that there was a component of what went into that decision that was motivated by race? Yeah, absolutely. And you'd be nice to think otherwise.
Let's just put it into perspective. And this isn't just a Florida State issue. Black coaches don't get opportunities to fail.
Well, that's my thing. So
my
like, boss,
Mike Norvell's getting every opportunity to fail, which I think is dope. And that's all people really ask for.
So my first boss out of college was a guy, Tom Rooney. His uncle is Dan Rooney, right? Founder of the Rooney Rule. And he put it perfectly one time. And he said, when people, because he was a Republican congressman, like he's not like a super woke guy that you would think of, right? But the Rooney Rule is you have to interview a black or a minority head coach and candidate. And he basically was like, look, the NFL has been predominantly black for 35 years now. And you look at 32 coaches, and right now, back then it was, Mike Tomlin won. He's like, so you're telling me out of all those players, only 1 out of 32 coaches is black? Like there's logically no way to say that just, if you did a random scatter plot, the number should be higher than that based on
just like even with college, and when you look at the amount of black coaches and things like that, I think it comes down to cultural 30% of the NFL, let's just say, is white. So you mean to tell me it's easier to find like most of your coaches, 32%, like let's say, I don't know what the numbers are. I know we got two and a half. We got 2.5 black coaches now. Like, there's you can't tell me McDaniels. Like McDaniels looks like you, Max, which is nothing wrong with that, but like it's just hard for me to say he's a black coach. But whatever. Let's say we have three out of 32. Damn, I've been doing fractions with my son. This is going to be a struggle.
3 out of 32 is a non-reducible fraction because it's on a drug.
So, anyways, you mean to tell me that 29 guys, you could pull 29 from 30% easier than you can pull 29 from 70? Like it just doesn't make sense. There should be a larger talent pool if that's what you're reaching from. But
I was just saying mathematically, because I'm a numbers nerd. If NFL coaches percentage-wise were representative of the U.S. population alone, right, they would have 4 black head coaches. So you have a sport where the elite of the elite, I think the NFL right now is about 80% black, but let's say 70% for the past 30 years, right, has been black, and they're not even representative of the racial mix of the United States of America in a random bar in America.
But it goes back to what I was talking about with the systemic thing. And I was talking about, again, it's not that people are trying to be racist. Like I'm giving people an out. I'm probably giving them more of an out than I should. But I'm just letting people know I'm going to hire the people I came up with.
Right.
Why am I? And who are the people who probably look more like me who I came up with? They're African Americans. Why are the people I came up with more African American? Well, you had things like redlining. You had segregation. You had a lot of that were in my mother's lifetime. So you've got, and those are the people who are coaching right now, the people who are my mother's age, for the most part, the black coaches that are getting chances. So now the flip side of it is, as an African-American coach, you cannot just go and hire you are forced, not by a rule, but by perception, to hire a more diverse group. So I'll use this example, using our fans' words. Willie Taggart had an HBCU staff. Willie Taggart had one more black coach than Mike Norvell.
Right.
So Mike Norvell doesn't have an HBCU staff. He has the best available coaches. Mm-hmm. Willie Taggart has his homeboys. Now, Willie Taggart has his homeboys.
I'll take it one step further. Mike Norvell is giving opportunity to minority coaches. Willie Taggart is bringing his boys in, which I'll admit, look, I will stand by my comments on Dante Pimpleton. Didn't like that hire.
No, don't get me wrong. But like, yes.
But it's a difference.
Pimp was his homeboy.
I've been guilty of it.
But I said, Pimp is his homeboy. He wasn't a bad running backs coach. Mm-hmm. He was a good recruiter. He got a 1,000-yard running back. Alonzo Hampton is the person that all of us scratched our head with. But I think the guy he wanted to get, they would not allow him to get from out of McNeese State, who ended up following him to FAU for the first year. He was a special teams guru. He had some DUIs way in his past, but he had been a head coach. So, like, that had passed. A lot of the guys that Willie Taggart –
So just make him the strength coach.
But, like, look at it like this. If Taggart would have brought the original crew from Oregon, it would have been his homeboys, but it would have looked a lot different in him. But the only reason people called him his homeboys is because he was black. He had no prior experience with Harlan Barnett. He had no prior experience with a ton of the coaches that were on his staff. Now, if you want to talk about hiring homeboys, the one thing that we all saw all the articles written was about Mike Norvell's tree. Most of the coaches that he hired came from his tree. That means you know them. That means they are your what?
Your homeboys.
It's just the perception of an African-American hiring other African-Americans. And I'm not suggesting that anybody who made that statement is racist. What I am suggesting is that's your perception because of what you were taught and what you need in life. And it's going to take a little bit of time for that to shift. The guy who's really the most influential, there's two people who I believe are the Bear Bryants of the current, civil rights is the current progression of America in sports. If you don't know about Bear Bryant did more for civil rights than any black person. And I'm going to tell you why he did. Bear Bryant got his ass whooped by USC. They brought some black. He said that year, and that USC coach happened to be one of his friends. So Bear Bryant knew exactly what he was doing. Bear Bryant said, when I find the need to recruit African-American players, I will. So what did he do? He scheduled the best team available. USC went into Tuscaloosa and whooped that ass. Now, that same year, a certain guy by the name of George Wallace said, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. Now, that next year, Bear Bryant recruited his first African American player, but one of them that he wanted to get ended up going to the University of Tennessee to be the first African American quarterback in the SEC. Do you know who Bear Bryant had called this young man to recruit? George Wallace. Bill Belichick, who is the most buttoned up in the NFL history, accidentally text Brian Flores instead of Brian Dabble, a guy who doesn't make mistakes.
Right.
You don't think, like, I'm smart enough. I got 4 Tonys that I know. 8 White Tony, Tony, and Black Tony. Now, Tony is just black. Black Tony is really dark skinned. Asian Tony and White Tony, Asian and white. But when I text them, I don't have any confusion. I'm pretty sure Bill Belichick has that. And then Bruce Arians would be the guy. You look at, when I went to the Super Bowl last year, I was shocked to see how he will be the guy. In a few years, you'll see it naturally take care of itself because we've had Rooney Rule. We've had more African American office people. We've got more African American coaches. Excuse me. While Mike Tomlin doesn't have an African American coach in his tree that's been able to go up, we could kind of somewhat say Byron Leftwich, but he's really Bruce Arians. Yeah. But like, isn't that's crazy, right?
Right. It's the unconscious bias. It's the homeboys thing. And like, for me, by the way, I don't know how much this we're publishing, like, this is learning for me, right? You're seeing it active. Like, I didn't realize that Mike Norvell had one less black person on his staff or not staff, but on-field coaches than Willie Taggart did. But you hear on Twitter enough that this coach just hired his boys, and yeah, you're pissed off, and I'm like, yeah, he just hired his boys. You don't even hear that about Mike Norvell to get that in your thought process. And I think
at the end of the day, if Willie would have won, everybody in the mama
it would have been his coach. Look at his coaching tree. Look at right,
but he didn't win. It's almost like he didn't win, and then it's always what it looks like, which I think is something that, like, again, Jordan Travis has to deal with this because it's a non-traditional black position. A lot of guys have to deal with this in corporate America. I typically don't have to deal with it as much as I used to because my name precedes itself. Most people come looking for me now as opposed to me going and looking for them. But like, I smile a lot because if I don't, I look mad. And that mad look is intimidating, which that has nothing to do with me. That has everything to do with the person who views me as intimidating before I even did anything. So it's not, again, and so even in all of that, I'm not complaining. I'm just understanding the situation in which I'm in and the rules in which I have to play by so that I can be as successful as possible. Like I said, I don't want a white person to feel bad at all for white privilege, because you know what? If I was white, I'd be using my white privilege all the time. I use my FSU privilege all the time. Like, you can't watch the game
that one
the same way I watch the game. Right. And that privilege. I earned that privilege. And again, like a lot of people who are in this, they're in it, earned it. It's just, well, damn, is there not a guy who looks different that earned it? And it's not just white people that do this. Like, I heard, I'm not going to say his name. I heard a former player suggest that he gets coached better from a Caucasian coach. And that's why he could not kind of get better under tag. And like, it just, even some of the stuff, like, one thing I do appreciate about Mike is the few amount of leaks. Like, just, again, this is just things, having been in the football locker room, been in the culture most of my life, that don't make sense. Like, do you understand how much game planning has to go into coaching? Like, offense speaks separately from the defense. The offensive coaching staff game plans and they install plays. A head coach job is to oversee it, even if he's done it. So I heard in tags last year that he called the defense and the offense. That is hard to do with I-9 flag football.
Right.
It's hard to do in high school on JV. It's damn near impossible to do on a college setting. Now,
no wonder his hair was all gray. God damn.
What happened is that, like, you heard Willie Taggart's telling him, like, forcing him, Kendall Browns, to run. No shit, you're up by 30 points. We don't want the other team to come back. We can't keep doing 3 and outs. Our best players are running back. I would tell him to run the ball too. You know what Mickey Andrews used to do when we were up in games and Jeff kept throwing? He's going down, cussing out the offensive staff, telling them to run the ball. Does that mean Mickey Andrews called the offense? No, that means he made a simple suggestion based upon observing. One would conclude that he used deductive reasoning to state that if you run the ball, time of possession is on our side and we're going to win games. But the one thing but even if that was to happen, we should have never known about that. It should not have leaked as much as it leaked. And that comes from a fundamental lack of respect that I believe Taggart's staff did not have for him. So I will give Mike kudos for that. Mike has way more respect from his staff because we haven't heard one BS story about Mike Norvell yet.
No.
Outside of what the players said about like the text message, which even in that, the text message situation wasn't bad. He just embellished a little bit. Like you had the perfect opportunity during the time to hit a home run. I love him. I can't even think of my guy's name. Everybody used to give him a hard time because he was from St. Louis, the black guy who's writing for the Raiders now. But anyways,
Sean Reed.
Yeah, Tayshaun. So Tayshaun, like you got a black journalist writing about a black issue about your black players, and you said you individually reached out to every one of the players. Man, during that climate, man, I was like, yo, Mike, you the guy. To find out that it was just a mass text, which was good. It was good enough. Like you could have just said, I sent a mass text telling my players, reach out to me if you have any questions. The problem is you made it seem like you took one extra step that other coaches weren't going to do for your black kids. And I think Mike does care about his players, but I just think those are the only times you see hiccups. And what did you see? You didn't see people attacking Mike Norvell for it. Mm-hmm. You saw people attacking Tayshaun Reed like he asked for the damn interview. They called him. And that's where the real aggravation comes. And it's not Mike's fault by any means. Again, Mike is a great guy. I think he's a good coach. The amount of aggravation is the amount of overprotection that the media has done in contrast to what they've done with the previous two coaches. And again, one white that won a national championship for you, and the other black that did nothing for you. But like you took your punches and you beat those guys up. And in this situation, you literally are like you've used every excuse. But when you look at other white coaches to compare them to, Lane Kiffin did they finish top 15 this year at Ole Miss? Ole Miss isn't a traditional power.
I believe around there, yeah.
It was their first 10-win regular season ever. I know that.
Right.
I don't know where they finished, but yeah.
So Lane Kiffin took his job when COVID happened. Lane Kiffin had COVID to deal with. In a more damning situation is Arkansas. Arkansas had won an SEC game in like 4 years before their coach who got hired late in the cycle and had to pick up Kendall Browse because he couldn't get an OC and nobody else wanted Kendall Browse because of some things that. Now I want to say this: Kendall hurt himself a little bit because Tag is in tight with one of the top families in football, which is the Harbaughs. And so like a lot of that stuff came out, and the Harbaughs were like, "Hey, this is what this guy did to my adoptive son." So right, wrong, and indifferent. That's what happened. But Arkansas has won. They came in and they won immediately. So when you see me, Drake, and I post like I don't want to hear that shit. I don't want to hear that shit because Arkansas was a terrible job. Ole Miss was a job where it was way more rundown. There's numerous examples across where people had the same set of circumstances that Florida State had, except for they won more than 8 games. And I think
I'm right there with you. Same thing with Michigan State too, with Mel Tucker right now, and he basically was a darling and top 5 team towards the end of the season too. So it's like it's the excuse for some reason that it holds a lot more weight with our own fan base. Where if you look around, like I don't know why we keep moving the goalposts for this guy. It's kind of
like Florida's not moving the goalposts. Florida fired a coach that was uber successful.
Yeah,
agreed.
Like
I will say though, I think there's two like we can both say Mike's not living up to the standard, which I agree with, but we can also say we don't have the luxury of firing him. And like I do want to I try to make that distinction of like I agree with everything we're saying, but I wouldn't pull the trigger on Norvell right now because it's like
no.
I don't think Mike should.
But to the Florida point, they sat through freaking what's his name, the redneck guy that's hilarious. No, before him, Muschamp. They sat through the Muschamp disaster. They did their time with McElwain until it literally got to the point where like they had to fire him for cause. And I think that afforded them the luxury of getting rid of a coach who wasn't up to the standard. But I don't want to derail the conversation. I just wanted to like kind of
and those guys are coming from
now, but
Those guys
we
are
saying he's
coming
not
off
up to
of
the standard.
like a 4-win season is what McElwain inherited. Not McElwain.
Mullen.
Mullen. Yeah, Dan Mullen
A lot of
inherited.
M's. Muschamp, McElwain.
Yeah. Mullen inherited a 4-win team, and they
Mm-hmm.
won 10 wins in his first year.
Right.
And I don't think Mike should be fired. I'll be clear.
Right, I agree.
I don't
just
want
that
Mike
context
fired.
in there of like,
I just think that, and here's the crazy part. Like, I don't know how many people listen to my interviews. I've interviewed Mike Norvell like 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And you know who doesn't make excuses? Mike Norvell.
Right.
No,
Mike Norvell doesn't want excuses made for him. Mike Norvell understands that if I don't win, they're gonna move me out of here. So that's what made it weird. Like when I was like, people are getting mad. I'm like, yo, I got 3 hours of video, 3 hours of tape where this man is telling you, don't make excuses for me. Like, I know what I inherited. I know what my job is. And I will say this as a guy who has a silent partnership in a company that does represent guys. It's very difficult to get people NIL deals when you've won 8 games in 2 years. So It's the same thing. People will say, James, what do you expect? What do you expect? We shouldn't have the top recruiting class. We're not winning games. Then people say, well, what do you expect? We're not winning games because we don't have top talent. Is it like that? Again, like I said before, how you do anything is how you do everything. When I see people make those excuses, it makes me question, like, are you any good? Or do you make these excuses at work? To use your excuse, I'm not using your excuse. Use you, Drake. Like, if you're representing me as an attorney, I don't care if I murdered 25 people in 4K. I hired you to get me off.
4K.
Like, your job is to get me off. If you don't get me off, you failed at your job. Now, you might not have had the best talent to work with in the case, but your job is to win. Either you win or you don't. But, like I said, Mike we'll see. We will know more about Mike Norvell and where this will be headed, I think, at the end of this year.
I think that you hit on something really important, and it's that, did quite kind of hit on it. One of the 2 areas that are fundamental to success in college football, recruiting or on-field performance, has to punch above its weight and then drag the other up, right? You either have to be a Cincinnati, where your average recruiting class on that team is 38th in the nation, and you just get the absolute best out of your kids and start, like, watch when they go to the Big 12. Now you're going to see big names going to Cincinnati. Or you got to be a Jimbo Fisher, where you can say, hey, look, I know we didn't have the best years in 07, 08, 09, but EJ, Christian, come play for me, and we're going to go back to the 90s. And he did it. So one of those has to drag the other up. And that's why I look at it, like you said, at the end of next year, is he can win 6 games with a top 10 class. But if we do this thing where it's just even, or he can win 12 games, right, or 11 games with a 20th class, but you can't be average at both again, in my opinion. You can't be 7 wins, 20th ranked class. Like, something's got to show us you're going to fix both foundational elements, and you've improved at least one of them to drag the other up.
And I believe it's something is not as hard of a fix as people think. I think people want to make excuses for NIL. People want to make excuses for a lot of different things. I've talked to a couple people off. I won't say it, but often, like, nobody really believes that NIL is the reason why we lost. I don't guess. Now, you could say Travis Hunter, but I believe Travis Hunter, we didn't miss out on him per se because of NIL. We missed out on him because a guy did a better job of selling on his work.
And we've talked about
the
that.
The only guy who could do that was Deion Sanders. Now, what I would suggest is that we have to do a better job of using the resource that we have that's better than anybody else in the nation, in my opinion, at least in our stronghold. And that's our alumni. And that's the guys who have played. And I'll just call it out. I'm not calling this out to be mean or anything. I'm not even suggesting that, he has to do it and that it's hurt him in recruiting. But like JP recruits Jacksonville. My stepfather is the largest white man in Northeast Florida, Toby Bullock, who just became the head coach of Mandarin High School. They're recruiting some kids from Mandarin High School. Like, I help out there. Like, JP goes to Mandarin all the time. You think he picked up the phone to call me?
Right.
To say, or hey, what do you know about this kid? Like, no, like, and I'm not. Don't do it. If you got it, you got it. But then don't fail. Like, what happened? There's a kid, Shaq. What's Shaq's? I think Shaq's his last name. Anyway, our wide receiver at Mandarin is a Power 5 guy we really want.
Yeah.
who do you think Shaq's going to ask about Florida State?
Oh, you?
So why aren't you talking to the guy that has direct relationship with the kid that you want to tell him like, yo, we really want him bad. Like we need that. And that's just one example. And that's just me. Orlando, you got Kenny Shaw that's in Orlando that's heavily training people. You got a guy, Aaron Jones, who played D tackle when I was there, who's got a great trenchman academy. Tampa, you got numerous guys in Tampa. Miami, you got all kinds of guys in Miami. If you go back and you look at all the high schools that produce top prep athletes, you know what you're probably going to find on that roster? At Florida State alone.
Yep.
So to not be tapping in to find out, I'll even make it a little bit sprinkle spices up to not find out who the bag man is. Like you're not doing your research properly. Like Travis Hunter, to go back to that, we're fighting Deion Sanders, and again with the salt of the earth guys like Charlie Ward. Love Charlie Ward to death. Charlie Ward's the only person who I don't curse in front of. I think I talked about, all these guys. That's who they were trying to get Travis Hunter to talk to, and I think he does need to talk to those guys. None of those guys can bend the kid's ear like Deion Sanders, but Travis Hunter lives in Atlanta. You know who lives in Atlanta who probably could talk bar for bar with Travis Hunter? Well, that's dope that you live in Atlanta. Next time I come, I got to hit you up. But there's a young man by the name of Peter Ward,
right,
that lives in Atlanta. I asked Pete. I said, Pete, did they ever tell you all that, Travis? He said, no. He's like,
that makes no sense to me because
he was like, I would have talked to him.
Right. So we.
It's like you're not using all the tools at your disposal, and like quite honestly, that just shows like lack of initiative, and you're just or just not even lazy, just you just don't go out of your way to do that.
He's not doing it.
It's a lack of resourcefulness.
Yeah,
and it's free. Yeah, we'll do it for free. You ain't got to pay us. Like you got an issue with guys who don't understand the standard. Well, you paid a guy who's, I get that. His nickname is the Sack Guru, but he's got a defensive line academy down in Miami, rightfully so. You paid him to come and work with your guys. Like, there's a guy, Mikael Carnegie, who played DB at Florida State when I was there, special teams guy. Like, those guys talk to him anyway. Why not bring him in an official capacity on the side and like to work with your guys when you cannot work with them? Why not? I love my saying, if you want to win, get the ball to the goddamn fullback. You ain't got no fullbacks? Hey, ain't nobody called me to say come work with Wyatt Rector. I'll work with Wyatt tomorrow. I'll make Wyatt into a damn good fullback. Like one thing, you can say whatever you want. I got passes that I've caught. I got touchdowns I scored.
Hey,
I know
you averaged 7.4 yards a catch your senior year.
Just saying.
It was on 7 catches, but you
listen. I wasn't dropping it. I wasn't dropping it, and I was sure-handed. I ran a screen. I was running screens at Florida State. We did a lot of things with me. But I mean, again, it don't have to be me. It could be bar none. William Floyd was the greatest who ever played the position. It's a lot of guys. Again, our love for the university you'll be surprised at what you can get for a pair of shorts, a t-shirt, and a hotel stay. If for guys to come in and it will give you the shirt off of their back to make sure that these young men are doing what they need to do. But I think that will help you with recruiting, and I think identification of talent. I won't say who, and I won't, because I don't want to bash a kid, and I hope they develop and become the best. But there's kids that I've straight up told them before, and this is not just under Norvell. I've said it under Tag. I said it under Jimbo. I've said it under even Bowden. I don't think this kid is Florida State caliber. Like, and they're like, how? And people are like, how do you know? Like, I could whoop him. He couldn't beat me. He couldn't have played when I was there. Like, like even now, like I had a good friends, and he worked at Florida State. He's a UF guy. He's a guy by the name of Jaron, aka Hova. And Hova has this phrase, this saying. I think everybody's adopted. He said at Florida, if they're not helping us beat Alabama, Georgia, or to beat Clemson if we match them, like Clemson's not a rival, or any of our rivals, I don't want them at my school. And so what I suggest that fans go and do, if you're like really a recruit, go watch the film. Can that kid help us beat Clemson? Can that kid help us beat Miami? It doesn't matter if they're a 3-star or a 5-star. From what you see, height, weight, speed, the film, do you think this kid is going to help us win? And a lot of times you can come in a local area and say, James, like just Jacksonville, James, you've been around these young men. What are your thoughts on these 10 guys? At worst, what we'll all be able to say is, I don't know. Let me find out. Let me go ask the right people about this kid. And then they'll tell me, and then I can give you an unbiased opinion. Actually, no, it's a heavily biased opinion of if I think the kid is going to help us win. I'm not the Pop Warner coach that's selling you a guy that I just think is good. Like, I just want this kid to have a scholarship. No, I'm the kind of guy that would tell if my son's not good enough to go to Florida State, you'll never hear my mouth. Like, my son needs to earn his scholarship. He ain't me. Like, that's how real I am. Like, and that's how real a lot of us are. It helps us, and again, just think about it in terms of NILs. Like, if an adult world, I make more money when Florida State's winning. Your podcast will do more numbers when Florida State's winning. You guys have added during that time with them locked inside. Fifth quarter was around 3,500 subscription when people thought we were going to. Now when we lost,
I know it was there.
It dropped.
Trust me.
It dropped. And then people talk about and message boards are very toxic in a losing culture. When you're winning and everything is smiles and Hallmark cards and stuff. Now, the only way to counteract that is head coaching searches. Now, that's not a stable business model. You don't want to fire coaches every year so that you can sell subscriptions, but you also don't want to have I don't want to have to lie about it. Like, I don't want to have to lie to people about Dugans potentially being fired when I knew Dugans wasn't getting fired. Like, I told people that in October. Like, Dugans ain't going. None of these guys are going anywhere unless they get other jobs. They're not going to be fired. They will all be back. People call me crazy. They got mad at me, and I'm just telling you guys from a guy who gets a chance to go see them in a different element than a press conference.
Well, that's
and
the bane of being a journalist.
That thinks they know everything.
Right.
It's between you, AMC, and Sonny right now, that place is kind of holding them
I'm just saying, like,
quarter.
No, I just mean in the journalist standpoint, it's funny. Like, we notice this on comments. I know you get it. It's like people act like if we say something, it's like we want it to happen, right? Like, if I say, hey, you didn't get a transfer quarterback. If Jordan gets hurt, you're going to win 3 games next year. It's like, Max, you're the worst human ever. Why would you say? It's like, I'm not out there with a hammer Nancy Kerriganing him. Like, right. I'm just saying, if he gets hurt, this is going to be the ramifications of not getting a transfer QB. That's all I'm saying.
I told people we wouldn't get a transfer quarterback in October.
But you say we're not going to fire Dugans. People say, why do you love Dugans? Why do you want Dugans to? It's like, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying
I'll be honest. I do love Dugans from Southside of town. That's my guy. I'm not saying you, but
either way.
It's two guys you'll never hear me talk bad about.
Sure.
Ron Dugans, Odell Higgins. Doesn't matter what my opinion is. Like, you won't hear it. They may hear it. Like, I'm just not going to fight that battle. But I also think I like those guys.
I like all of them. He was, but I wouldn't say anything bad. Like, Odell just looks like a guy you just wouldn't risk saying something bad to.
I like all the staff. It's just at the end of the day, there are hard truths that it's okay to accept. Right. But, and there's some things that I'm not telling. Like, one thing about me in my career in journalism or whatever, I think I'm smart, but a lot of things I'm not smart enough to really create. Like, that was brought to me. Like it was literally told to me by somebody who has very, very good knowledge about any of the stuff. Now, does it always happen? Nah, but I don't know enough to like make up this guys and the staff and this person right here, blah, blah, blah. Like, some of the names that I report, I don't even know. I'm just telling you what relationship I've had. And a lot of those people who work at Florida State, like, the cool thing about being a state of Florida worker is that they don't get fired. They work their jobs for 25 to 35 years. They stay in place. The same people who were working compliance when I was at Florida State are the same people working compliance right now. And one thing I can tell anybody who never believed me in the coaching search, there is one place that every name has to cross before they go anywhere, and that's compliance.
Yep.
Always know they got to go through compliance. So, if you say that was never going to happen and I report it, the difference between you is maybe some booster told you something. I'm telling you something that the guys got cleared, and that's why. And it's not just Florida State, Florida, a lot of other places, and a lot of the information I get. Like, those are the first people that I always talk to, because when Mike Norvell got hired, he had to submit 4. I'm just using the number, 4 potential OCs, 4 DCs for this position, because for whatever reason we may not clear that person. Like it may be something that we don't want to fight that battle. So they have to be able to tell, hey, coach, now you can go back to, all right, you sent us these 4, these 2 are good. Now go back and now you can go and like start your interview process or whatever.
Interesting.
The other thing too is that the one thing that I've also told people is that there's HR. Every person who's fired has to do an exit interview. And a lot of times we don't know what the exit interviews are, but those exit interviews, they have to kind of tell the truth a little bit, and a lot of other stuff gets exposed. So, like first, like the stuff like Tag is a druggie, right? Like you got to take a piss test. Like if he was, like we wouldn't be paying a buyout if Tag was a dopehead. He would have failed it. Now I get why people say it because of his demeanor. I 100% understand it. But state of Florida, like while let's say medicinal marijuana is legal, it's still not. It's still federal. It's still a federal issue. Right. It's still a thing where you can clearly be fired from.
You be in violation.
They fire with cause.
Yeah.
Like all you got to do is say, "Here's a cup today, surprise," and you got to take it. But every state of Florida employee, at least on the college level, when you get released, you have to pass another thing. But like again,
you have something similar at Hopkins too. When I was there, like with the clients, like stuff like basically everything has to go through that. Especially HR too is something that people kind of forget you have to go through.
James, this has been absolutely incredible. I'm serious, man. This has been fucking awesome. I have to go eat my Chipotle burrito, or I'm gonna die. But
yeah, I'm dude, pretty hungry too.
I appreciate.
I feel like I eat too.
I meant it, man. Like I appreciate you letting me have those conversations that are like kind of tough for like. Not tough. Like, I'm the one from the place of privilege, but like, I appreciate you having like a real honest conversation, letting me ask those questions that like aren't always, easy for people that look like me to ask people that look like yourself and have a legit dialogue, right? So I appreciate you doing that.
Really one thing I'll leave you with, and again, I just always tell people with CRT and a lot of these other things that they fear, which the CRT is nothing to fear. I really don't understand it. But what my point is, if the battlefield, this is a Marine saying, if the battlefield is even, then we did a poor job of preparing the battlefield. Everything in life is a competition. There's nothing wrong with using the privilege and the leverage that you have, like to be able to get anything. Same thing with an athlete. Like my son will be afforded opportunities to train and nutrition that is exponentially better than what I ever could have thought, and what a lot of kids would have. He'll have a privilege of being a middle class suburban kid, and that's dope. He should never feel bad about that. The problem is when you don't recognize that you do have privileges that other people don't have, and you use it as you use it to judge them. So but at the end of the day, nobody cares. Like my mom, nobody cares that the neighborhood that I came out of. Mm-hmm. All they care about is the result, and it's my job as an adult to do that. But that doesn't mean I'm not aware. So I think again, that could go into a lot of aspects of life.
Sure.
Nobody cares that our roster is quote unquote bad, from what people say. Nobody cares that, maybe we don't have as much talent. All we care about is, are we going to go to a bowl game? How are we going to pick ourselves up out of this? And what I think as a fan base, what we should do is, there's nothing wrong with healthy dialogue about what we feel should happen and what shouldn't happen. What we got to do, though, is at the end of the day, is pull together and do everything in our power to make sure that Florida State football is functioning as a well-oiled machine, whether we win, whether we go defeated or undefeated. And I think the problem that we will have, whether Mike Norvell is the coach at the end of his tenure, or if we're getting a new coach in 2 more years, is that if we're sitting in a situation and we're waiting for a wins to build a football-only facility, we're waiting on wins to be able to go support Jordan Travis's 4th and 14 gear. If we're waiting on wins to be able to, if you're a business owner, you're waiting on wins to be able to go support these guys with the NIL. I think you're putting you the fan is putting the program in a situation that's going to be difficult to get itself out, even when we win. And when we win, that will make the wins temporary. If you want to build the dynasty back up again, make Doak an actual threatening place. I went to so many games last year, so many empty seats. I don't want to toot my own horn, but if you got tickets and you don't want to go to the game because you don't want to see the product, give them to me. I'll give them to a kid in Tallahassee that would love to go see Doak Campbell Stadium for the first time. We need to and again, that's even something again from an administration standpoint. They know by Friday if the game's gonna sell out. Right. If you got 10,000 extra tickets, why don't you just go to Bond Elementary School? Why don't you go to these different places and give these kids these tickets without me having to facilitate it? Like make it a place that when a kid comes in, they see that Notre Dame atmosphere was crazy.
That was great. First time
That's
my
what
daughter ever
everything
went
needs to
to.
be.
Super exciting.
And it was just like I said for the first time, this is what it was like when I played. No excuses. When we played Miami at noon, game was packed. Like I want to hear. I want every. Again,
09, I remember it.
It's so many excuses and not enough action.
Right.
We need to become the cool thing about the Seminole tribe is the Seminole tribe is unconquered. They fought to the end when their backs were against the wall. They never submitted. They never gave up. They had an unwavering faith that they would be who they are, and that's why we are proud to wear the emblems. That's why we're proud to have the name. As a fan base, you got to check your fandom to see if it matches what we represent.
Yep. No, exactly right, man. That's a great way to close it. As fans, sort of a message to y'all is like, the Mike Norvell message, how you do anything is how you do everything. And I think we've all seen enough of life, and y'all know this to be true. Search your feelings. If you're miserable while you're poor, you're going to be miserable while you're rich. If you're miserable when it's shitty weather outside, you're going to be miserable when there's great weather outside. How you do anything.
Well, I can't hear you guys.
It's all good. We're bringing it back in.
It's okay,
anyways,
my guy.
Appreciate it.
Hey, anytime, my
See
guy.
you, James.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
man.
See ya. But how you do anything is how you do everything. Guys, if you're not supposed to like that we're losing, okay? You just heard from James. He doesn't like that we're losing. But if you're the most miserable fan and nothing is good enough for you now, and the goalposts move every time we accomplish anything, I promise you'll be the fan on the message boards when we're 13-0, angry that we didn't win every game by enough points, or that we didn't have the stat line you wanted to see in another game. So, I don't know. Support the team, be fans, but most importantly, support James, support Drake, support me, support Dave. Tune in to Locked On Seminoles next time. Drake, thanks for facilitating. James, sorry we cut out, but thank you for a wonderful interview. Love you, man. Huge fan.